I'm extremely honored to participate in this great conference on the topic of Buddha nature. And for giving me this great opportunity, I would like to thank the organizers, the University of Vienna and Sada Foundation. The topic of my paper is kind of in continuation with Dr. Tina's. It is about Jigten Sumgon's view of Buddha nature and how confusion distinguishes a Buddha from a sentient being. So in order to understand Jigten Gonpo's view of Buddha nature, I have looked mainly into three different texts by Jigten Sumgon himself. They are the Dugung Tsokcho Chemo and other two Tsokcho. And then for the last part of the title, which is distinguishing a Buddha from a sentient being, I looked into a text by Jigten Sumgon again, which is called Chakchen Tulpa Tseche, investigating into confusion from the Mahamudra point of view. And this text I have attempted to translate, and it is at the end of the paper. Everybody can have a look at it, and there were some difficulties during the translation, so I don't know, some of the terms might have been not really properly translated. So if there are great scholars here who have better understanding of the terms, so if you have suggestions, I would appreciate that. So the paper begins with a brief introduction to Jigten Sumgon. Kyoba Jigten Sumgyu Gompo, or Jigten Sumgon, was one of Drogön Pagmo Drüpa's 8 prominent disciples, the founder of the Digung Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism, and one of the most influential intellectuals of the 12th to 13th century Tibet. Pao Tsuglak Tengwa states in his Dharma history, titled Chujung Kebegedun, that Drogön Pagmo Drüpa had 8 extraordinary disciples who founded their own Kagyu sub-schools. Among them, Jigten Sumgon was the main holder of Drogön Pagmo Drüpa's teachings. Jigten Sumgon was born in Kham, in a place called Tsungu in the Dento province. As a child, he was known for his extraordinary intelligence and compassion, especially for the poor and animals. His compassionate nature is evident from the fact that he remained a vegetarian all his life and prohibited the use of alcohol and meat, even in the tantric rituals, attesting to the importance he held for monastic vows. Upon hearing simply the name of Drogön Pagmo Drüpa from Goda Pandita, Jigten Sumgon, known then as Tsumbakyap, felt a remarkably strong sense of devotion and longing to see him. Therefore, he moved immediately from Kham to central Tibet and became a disciple of Drogön Pagmo Drüpa, who at that time was leading 500 highly accomplished disciples at his seat, Densa Thil. Drogön Pagmo Drüpa gave him the Bodhisattva vows and changed his name to Rinchen Pal. Eventually, he became popularly known as Jigten Sumgyu Gompo, which was the name he himself used when he referred to his teacher, Drogön Pagmo Drüpa. Drogön Pagmo Drüpa gave Jigten Sumgon the entire set of empowerments, transmissions, and instructions of the Kagyu lineage and made a public prophecy. You will be a great meditator. You will be greater than just a great meditator. And I'm very happy about that. After the death of Drogön Pagmo Drüpa in 1170, Jigten Sumgon became the successor to the seat of Drogön Pagmo Drüpa at Densa Thil for 3 years. Thereafter, at the age of 38, he moved and settled at Drikung, where the number of his disciples increased over the years to many thousands. He founded Digung Changchupling in 1179, which became his main seat and the center of the Digung Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. This is, as Jamgon Kongtrul Lodo Thye says, I don't have the whole quotation, just the end of it, in the PowerPoint. The master of interdependence, Kyoba Jigten Sumgon, established the Digung seat. It is renowned that he gathered 180,000 disciples, such as the Siddhas, Nyo, Gar, and Chö, and others. They flourished so extensively, as the saying goes, all mountains have Trigungpa hermits, all plains have Trigungpa plain dwellers. One of Jigten Sumgon's, end of the quote, so one of Jigten Sumgon's unique skills as a teacher was how he taught the three vows of Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva, and secret mantra as integral parts of a single path, with no contradiction between them. His main teachings were the 5 branches of Mahamudra and the 6 dharmas of Naropa. His corpus of teachings were later consolidated into the pith teachings of genuine Dharma single intention, Tamche Gongbachikpa, about which Katrin will be speaking in the next days. Jigten Sumgon's disciples practiced all over Tibet and the Himalayas, and thus the Digung Kagyu school spread from China to the Himalaya and is still continuing to grow around the globe. Now, Tina already talked about these 2 traditions of Ratnagotra Vibhaga, so I will read a little bit quickly to save the time. The topic of Buddha nature, or the essence of Tathāgata, found its way into Tibet mainly after Ngok Loden Sherab and Tsang Khaoche studied and translated materials Ratnagotra Vibhaga under their Kashmiri teacher Sajjana. Although these 2 early Tibetan scholars of the Ratnagotra Vibhaga had the same teacher, their approaches to the subject were not the same. Ngok, being younger and with his good command of the Sanskrit language, translated the text into Tibetan in Kashmir and taught it extensively in Tibet. He even wrote a concise commentary on the Ratnagotra Vibhaga, on the basis of which more extensive commentaries were produced by his disciples, Drolungwa Loto Jungne and Zhang Tsepang Chökyi-lama. Thus, Ngok and his main disciples started a tradition of in-depth study and contemplation of the Ratnagotra Vibhaga, which Jamgon Kongtrul calls the Gyula Thosam Giluk, that gradually produced many eminent scholars who taught and wrote many commentaries on the Ratnagotra Vibhaga, but with some hermeneutical differences. Tsang Khaoche, on the other hand, was older than Ngok and had no knowledge of Sanskrit. More importantly, his interest was more in the practice than teaching. Therefore, he, with the help of Zugawe Dorje as a translator, received practical instructions on the 5 treatises of Maitreya from Sajjana and practiced them. Thus, he taught the Ratnagotra Vibhaga in Tibet from the perspective of a practitioner, thereby starting a meditative tradition called the Gyula Gomlukpa of scholar come practitioners of the Ratnagotra Vibhaga that includes prominent teachers such as Karmapa Rangjung Dorje, Goe Lozawa, Kunkhen Dobopa, Taranatha, and so on. Now about Jigten Sumgon, to which of these traditions he kind of come closer. So of the 2 traditions of Ratnagotra Vibhaga, Jigten Sumgon seems to have taken the root of the meditative tradition of Tsang Khaoche, probably because he was himself a great practitioner of Mahamudra. This is evident from how he emphasizes the practice of Dharma against study and contemplation, and being a realized person, which he calls Tokden, against a scholar, which he calls Geshe, and even makes an almost ironic reference to Ngok Lozawa at the end. So this is from the Drigung Tsokche Chemo, the great Drigung assembly teaching. So Jigten Sumgun says, some say each person who belongs to a community of study and contemplation is a scholar. However, those who are in the company of an authentic teacher are realized beings. Realized beings are Buddhas, and a single realized being is superior to the many scholars who fill the world like a forest of sugar canes. Therefore, practice of Dharma is more excellent. The inherent nature of the mind is primordially unborn, and it is emptiness. When one realizes this directly, the three times and the entire sphere of the knowables also become directly realized. The attainment of the vast clairvoyance of knowing the three times is also described as a result of this. It is by the power of such realization that one becomes capable of bringing stability to the unstable minds of others and free them from the interferences of maras. So I have put the end of the quote here. When Nagarjuna stabilized Nagabodhi's mind, he could do so not because he was a scholar. All of the qualities, such as abandoning samsara and so forth, result from this realization, not from study and contemplation or scholarly qualities. Ngok Lotsawa also couldn't stop at study and contemplation. He had to meditate. So this kind of statement of Jigten Sumgon puts him closer to the lineage of practitioners of Ratnagotra Vibhaga. And the next is about Ratnagotra Vibhaga and the Ali Kagyu masters, according to mainly, Gampopa, Phagmodruba, around that time, according to Jigten Sumgon. So the Kagyu school, being a practice lineage, gives much importance to the lineage masters and their blessing for the success and effectiveness of whatever practice they undertake. From this point of view, Maitripa, discovering the text of Ratnagotra Vibhaga, and Dharma Dharmata Vibhaga, and Sajjana, receiving the transmission of this text from Ananda Kirti, a disciple of Maitripa, establishes a close lineage connection between Maitreya's Ratnagotra Vibhaga and the Kagyu lineage. As Maitripa was Marpa's main teacher of Mahamudra teachings, and thus he is considered one of the main Indian Kagyu masters. Besides this, the importance of Maitreya's teaching on Buddha nature and its relevance to the Mahamudra teachings of the Kagyu lineage is very evident from how often Gampopa, Phagmodrupa, Jigten Sumgon, and other Kagyu masters make reference to the Ratnagotra Vibhaga in their works. For instance, Gampopa begins his jewel ornament of liberation, Takpothargin, by reciting Ratnagotra Vibhaga 1.27 to establish the cause of perfect awakening. The kind of status Gampopa, Phagmodrupa, and Jigten Sumgon gave to Ratnagotra Vibhaga becomes clear from the following passage from Jigten Sumgon's work called Onge Jupa. That is the name of the text requested by Onge, who was a disciple of Jigten Sumgon. In this text about Gampopa, Jigten Sumgon says, the Guru of beings prophesied by the sage, the marvelous Lord in the degenerated time, the one known as the Lord Physician Guru said, the Dharma I teach is none other than the sublime continuum of the great vehicle. About Drogom Phagmodrupa, the friend of the three worlds, the protector of beings, the king of Dharma, the precious teacher, repeatedly said, the Dharma I teach is the sublime continuum of the great vehicle. I have heard the protector of the world, that is Drogom Phagmodrupa, say repeatedly, I have made careful endeavors in the instructions of this, the Mahamudra of the sublime continuum of the great vehicle. So here according to Jigten Sumgon, Pagmoduba used the term Mahamudra together with the Buddha nature. So the next is Jigten Sumgon's position on the status of the third wheel of Dharma. So it is also said in the Gongchik that the third wheel of Dharma is basically definitive, and that is here Jigten Sumgon says, referring to Buddha's own words, Jigten Sumgon says that a Buddha is flawless because of the perfection of purity, self, joy, and permanence. And the Dharma he teaches, as well as the Sangha who put the Dharma into practice, are uninterrupted. This statement of the Buddha was disputed with various questions, and the Buddha established it. The unwise, ignorant people say that this is a sutra that shows various vehicles. Calling it an established sutra is good, but someone who knows what is established is hard to find. Just like cutting the root of a tree and praising the tiny little branches, one wonders what will be the state of those who despise the third turning of the wheel, which is the unsurpassed essence of Dharma that reveals the definitive meaning. Now, next is Jigten Sumgon's view of Ratnagotra Vibhaga. Apparently, the Tibetan exponents of Tathāgatagarbha Sutra and Ratnagotra Vibhaga give differing interpretations of the three reasons given in Ratnagotra Vibhaga 1.27 to establish the presence of Buddha nature in all sentient beings. Although these interpretations are numerous, all can be roughly grouped into two. A, those who accept the Buddha nature in sentient beings as a full-fledged Buddha, and the qualities and activities of the Dharmakaya are primordially inseparable from it. B, those who accept the Buddha nature that pervades sentient beings as merely the potential in the minds of sentient beings, the natural purity that serves as the substantial cause of the wisdom of Buddhahood or Dharmakaya. When this cause is referred to as the essence, Nyingpo, of Tathāgata, the name of the result, which is Tathāgata, is nominally applied to the cause. From these two, the second position is based on Ngok's interpretation of the three reasons given in this verse from Ratnagotra Vibhaga. So that interpretation is, when the perversion of the Dharmakaya is taken as the reason for the presence of Buddha nature in sentient beings, Buddha in the compound Buddha nature refers to the actual Buddha, while sentient beings' possession of the Buddha's nature is nominal. For the second reasoning in this verse, which is suchness, suchness is the actual essence of both Tathāgata and sentient beings as it is, merely from the perspective of the natural purity present in both. The third reason, potential, which is Rik, is nominated as essence of Tathāgata for being its cause. Actually, it is the essence of sentient beings. Thus, those who interpret this verse from Ratnagotra Vibhaga in line with Ngok do not agree with the interpretation that the Buddha nature on the ground, path, and result levels are identical. In this regard, Jigten Sumgon seems to take the position of the first group, as we can see in his Tsokchö Ringyoma. So it's another teaching for the assembly, compiled by his main disciple Chenga Shirab Jungne, who was also his nephew. So in this Tsokchö, Jigten Sumgon says, "Today, at this occasion, where the important people of Tsal have come, I am going to teach a Dharma that is extremely great. Therefore, keep this in your minds. If one wonders Well, what is that extremely great Dharma? It is the fact that all of us sentient beings in general are completely awakened Buddhas since primordial time. If one wonders, where is this one extremely great Dharma and who taught it? It was taught by the teacher Tathāgata, but let us put the great vehicle secret mantra on the side for a time being. It is the intention of the perfection vehicle of characteristics, as established by Lord Maitreya in what is called the sublime continuum. A part of this quote: it is sublime because there is nothing superior to it, and is not in common with the Sharvakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas, actually not in common with Madhyamika. It is known as the Dhatu, or the essence of Tathāgata, or the ground. All sentient beings do not fall outside this nature of being completely awakened Buddhas since primordial time. Therefore, it itself is the ground, itself is the path, and itself is the fruition. And thus, it is known as the continuum Gyu. So that's how he describes the Tantra, or Gyu, in the name of the Shastra. Thus, the Dhatu in sentient beings, which is completely pure by nature and taught by the Buddha through 9 analogies and 9 meanings in the Tathāgatagarbha Sutra, is sublime in the sense that there is no other sutra more superior to this. It is continuum in the sense that the Dhatu, i.e. the Dharmakaya nature of the mind, is identical on the ground, path, and fruition levels. Among these 9 analogies, Jigten Sumgon uses the analogy of a Buddha who is fully adorned with the major and minor marks sitting inside a fully bloomed lotus to establish his position that a completely awakened Buddha exists in all sentient beings since primordial time. Furthermore, Jigten Sumgon equates this nature of sentient beings with the Dharmakaya, and also says that the qualities and activities of the Dharmakaya are not separate. He says Tamidepa from the Dharmakaya, just like the sun and its light, or a musk and its fragrance. They are inseparable, just like form is empty and emptiness is form. And the quote in this regard is, if one wonders, isn't that simply the state of utter peace, or the unborn or suchness that is spontaneously present? To this question, he answers, both the qualities and the activities of the Dharmakaya are not separate from the Dharmakaya, just like the sun and its light rays, and musk and its fragrance. They are inseparable, just like form is emptiness and emptiness is form. Ordinary beings cannot comprehend this level of Buddha's teaching, as it is like the sun shining on the blind. What Buddha has shown is what is present in the nature of beings, and as one puts that into practice, they attain the result of Buddhahood. So that was up to this was about Jigten Sumgon's view of the Buddha nature and how he thought about the third wheel of Dharma and Buddha nature in sentient beings. Now the next part of the paper is a kind of introduction to this text. It is called Chakchen Tulpa, which is translated as a Mahamudra investigation into confusion. So this text begins with a question from one of Jigten Sumgon's disciples by the name of Khenpo Zopa. Khenpo Zopa's main question was, who came first, the Buddha or the sentient being? Okay, so then in response to that, he gave this kind of pointing out instructions or or the method to investigate into confusion. And this text is fully translated, and it's at the end of the paper, which is available in the Dropbox in Google Drive. And I've only quoted the beginning main part of that text. So it's just to introduce this text. The question remains, if sentient beings are already endowed with all the Buddha qualities in the form of Buddha nature, what is it that separates a sentient being from a Buddha? In his Chakchen Trupatse Mahamudra Investigation into Confusion, Jigten Sumgon describes the occurrence of Buddha and sentient being by investigating how confusion, the primary adventitious defilements, arises and how it can be eliminated. These Mahamudra instructions on how to identify confusion is elaborated by presenting sentient beings in terms of dharmins and Buddha nature in terms of dharmata. So at the beginning of this text, from the point of view of the absolute truth, the Jigten Sumgon says there is no distinction between Buddha and sentient being, samsara and nirvana. All of these are relative. So this is, I thought, quite in line with what Jigten Milarepa said to one of his main non-human disciples, Tsiringma, when she asked him about the definitive dharma. And Milarepa said to her, in terms of the absolute truth, let alone obstructors, even Buddha does not exist. There is no meditator nor meditation, no stages and paths to traverse, nor their signs, no result in terms of bodies and wisdoms, and thus there is no nirvana. For these are merely imputed names and words. Okay, so Jigten Sumgon also begins his answer with something similar, and that is, so after Khenpo Zopa asked him the question, then Jigten Sumgon said, between the Buddha and the sentient being, one does not come before the other. To begin with, when there is neither the Buddha nor the sentient being, there isn't any ground, path, and result. There is no mind, no dharma, no teacher. There is nothing to say, think, or describe. There is no listening, no hearing, and no words. There is no self and other, no good and bad, no joy and suffering, no excellent and wicked, and so forth. Thus, it is just like space without division, and it is neither being full nor empty, neither increasing nor decreasing. Okay, so then from the perspective of the relative truth, Tanyegingola, relative truth, Jigten Sumgon says, however, in terms of the Buddha, the foremost is the dharmata, what is known as the original Tathāgata, the unproduced, self-arisen primordial Buddha. In terms of the sentient being, the foremost is the unceasing dharmin, what is known as the mind, the mental consciousness, and the dependent. Since these two occur simultaneously, the dharmin and the dharmata serve as the basis for both the Buddha and sentient beings, and thus they came into being simultaneously, because the dharmin and dharmata have no sequence, like one comes before the other. They are inseparable. So, the essence of Buddha nature is the union of clarity and emptiness. So that's, now we are out of the quote, sorry. The essence of Buddha nature is the union of clarity and emptiness, Sartong Zongjuk, and the clarity is equated with the dharmin, and the emptiness is equated with the dharmata. Thus, Buddha nature is the ground of both samsara and nirvana, in the sense that the realization of Buddha nature brings nirvana, and the failure to realization of the same brings nirvana. This is in line with Ratnagotra Vivāga 1.46, which says it manifests as perverted views in ordinary beings, as the reversal of this in those who see the truth, and it manifests as it is in unperverted way and as freedom from elaboration in Tathāgatas. So this verse mentions how an ordinary being, a realized being, and a Tathāgata perceive the same Buddha nature differently, i.e. incorrectly, correctly, and precisely. Since the Dharmin and Dharmata are inseparable and simultaneous, Buddha and sentient beings occur at the same time, relatively speaking. Thus, this passage explains that Buddha nature is the ground of both sentient beings and the Buddhas, and thus it is in line with Ratnagotara Vibhaga 155 and 157, which explains how all the aggregates, elements, and senses are based upon karma, afflictions, and incorrect conceptualities that abide in the pure nature of the mind, just like the earth, water, fire, wind, and wind abide in space. Now, in Chakchen Trupa says that Dharmata is also known as the primordial Buddha. It is also known as the spontaneously present Buddha, the ground. It does not waver from the state of the great primordial pure ground. It is the state of sameness, and it is spontaneously present. It is devoid of the three times, and it has no arising, ceasing, or changing. This, known as the primordial original Adi Buddha, is present in all beings. So he kind of equates the Buddha nature with the Adi Buddha. Being unable to recognize such presence is known as the Dharmin, the mental consciousness, and the mind. So then in the text, he explains how this whole thing starts, the co-emergent ignorance, and then the sense consciousness develop, and then samsara appear like a show. And this whole thing is beautifully explained in the text, with some good examples. So I thought this text is worth looking at in order to understand Jigten Sumgon's view, and thereby understanding the connection between the teachings of Buddha nature and Mahamudra. And this passage equates the naturally pure essence of the mind, Rangjin Namtak, or Buddha nature, with Dharmata. Did I read that already? The primordial Buddha. This echoes what Jigten Sumgon says in his Tsokchö Ringonma, that all sentient beings are primordially fully awakened. Therefore, one can deduce that for Jigten Sumgon, the presence of Buddha nature in sentient beings, as introduced in Ratnagotara Vibhaga 1.27, is not merely the emptiness of the mind, it is the Dharmakaya, and it's not separate from the qualities and activities. Thank you for your attention.
Please clarify, as you were a translator, and I have taken note of your quotes, and a question which puzzles me since quite some time, which are the terms of Khenpo and Henki. Whether you consider them to be the same or not. You have also given the term which I noted down of Nido Nyamdu Yongwa, and also Nyamdi Hlundu.
Nyamdi Hlundu.
Yeah. Same or not the same? Please explain different.
I think in some ways, they are touching at the same point, but there are different words for describing different aspects of one thing. For example, when you talk about, when you use the term Hlundup, it is to describe how it is, not created by someone, how it is not manufactured. Okay, so when you say Henke, it again shows that it is not like first, for example, when we say Khenpo, it is not like in the first moment one was not a Buddha, and then from the next moment one started to become a Buddha. So in order to negate that, in order to establish the primordial, like being timeless nature, then the term Khenpo is used.
Thank you, Khenpo. That's a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, we talked a little bit yesterday, and I was so intrigued. With Jigten Sunggun, you don't really, as we found with other early masters, they almost shy away from using the typical terms for Buddha nature.
Mm-hmm.
But he has this, as he mentioned, this Shiyam Bab
Yeah.
as his, it's very difficult to translate.
Mm-hmm.
But can you elaborate a little bit? First of all, is it true that he doesn't use Daeshik Ningpo in any of his writings, or do you actually find the standard terms?
He, for example, in these quotes, these are supposed to be his direct words, and he's using, actually in one of the Tsokchu, he really praises the Uttara Tantra so much, like in many shlokas. I couldn't incorporate all of them here. He says, I take refuge in the sublime continuum and so on. So he does mention, and in Gongchik, Catherine will be talking more extensively. But Shibab is, one of the main terms in Gongchik. Actually, it is the most important term. So the first Vajra statement, there are 150 Vajra statements, and the first one is Chu Kun Shisam Babkin Neluk Ten. So whatever the Buddha taught, what it shows, what it establishes is the natural, or it's very hard to translate. Katrin, how do you translate that?
I translate it as fundamental nature.
Mm-hmm. So the natural or fundamental nature of all phenomena. So actually, Jigten Sunggun in Gongchik says that there is no teaching of the Buddha which is like provisional and like a lie. All teachings from the beginning to the end is definitive in its own way. For example, in the first wheel of Dharma, it talks about karma and result. So when a karma is created, the result cannot be denied. It comes. So therefore, it does not deceive. And therefore, Jigten Sunggun says, in general, there is no teaching of the Buddha which is not definitive. Okay, but when we talk in terms of the view, then he does not say much about the second wheel of Dharma being not definitive or provisional, but he definitely says the third wheel of Dharma, which he calls seems to call instead of Thekpan Nachok Temba, that which shows various vehicles, he preferred to use the term Tenla Pape, Dode Tenla Papa. Tenla Papa means it establishes the whole base, path, and result properly in this sutra. So this is also included in the Gongchik.
So, can I just follow on? So she is understood as emptiness and Bab as Tamphel.
Yeah. So Bab is, in this word, basic meaning, it has also like descending, So it's in the sense of where it ends up, by nature, not force. Like if phenomena is empty in essence, it is not created into emptiness. Okay, this is how it is. This is where it ends up. If you analyze or if you meditate, if you realize, this is how it turned out to be. So Bab probably is in that sense. This is where it ends or where it concludes. And in the Ladakhi language, we say Bab we use to describe personality also. Like we say to people Bab Chen. Bab Chen means somebody who is very well-mannered and well-disciplined, whose mind is not like a monkey mind, who is who is like very polite and who is very friendly and who is very admirable. This we call Bab Chen. Bab, not like freaking out all the time.
Thank you very much for this wonderful summary of Jigten Sungren's work.
Mhm.
And I would like to use the opportunity to find out what, Jigten Sungren said or might have said to the critique, Vasubandhu's critique of the concept of Adi Buddha. In his Mana Sutra Alankara commentary, Vasubandhu says, well, if the notion of Adi Buddha is problematic because you become a Buddha only through the accumulation of merit and wisdom, and if you were a Buddha already throughout beginningless time, there would be no need to accumulate merit and wisdom. So how would Jigten Sungren address this critique, or is there some discussion of the concept of Adi Buddha in relation to the accumulation of merit and wisdom?
I have honestly I've never come across such a text where he explains this, specifically. But the accumulation of merit, the accumulations do not produce the Dharmakaya. It only removes the defilements. So that is a kind of, he also said in that some of the things I quoted, there is no increasing, there is no decreasing, it's the equalness, sameness, and so forth. So that's, I think, notion is also his notion, that the accumulations are meant to eliminate the obstacles, the obstructions, not to newly create a non-Buddha into a Buddha.
So it's exactly as the Chonampa's reply to this critique.
Okay. All right.
Chris, yeah?
He loves the word yay, doesn't he? There's three right there. Yay Sangye, yay Tok. That's a beautiful one, isn't it? And then yay Da. Yay Da Khenpo. Are you sure he's not a Nimapa, actually? But anyway, what's my question? Do you see that a lot in his writing? And do we find a lot of that use of yay in these neologisms and these new terms prior to him? That's maybe a question for you as well. In copyright writing, not in email writing.
Actually, I also found another text in Jigten Sungren's collection, which is in the form of verse. And it's talking more or less the same things, but in a verse form. And this one, I chose to translate this one because it is like a question and answer. It's like an interview. So I thought it is easier for people to understand. So I chose to do this. But the other one, in the form of verse, is also kind of clear and quite short. And yeah, he uses these terms which may be similar to Dzogchen, but actually it's the same.
I just think it's beautiful how flexible that term is. And I feel that they're moving away from philosophy towards poetry when they start to use that word.
We have time for one more question.
Khenpo, can you go back to the slide about the elements? You went through it very quickly, but yeah, maybe this one. So could you unpack this a little bit? Is he equating the 5 elements, the Jungwon Na, with the arising of Desha Nipo? What's the correlation?
Yeah, the confusion. Yeah. So in the Uttara Tantra text, they use the term adventitious defilements, right? So in the Mahamudra instructions, they use tulpa instead of loburgitima. But in this text, towards the end, he uses this term loburgitima, adventitious defilement, once. But most of the time he uses the tulpa. Now the tulpa, arise on the basis of the pure nature of the mind. Okay, so it is not born from it. So
It arises with the lung and so forth? Does it do a whole kind
that is the example. For example, in space, the earth and water and wind and all of this, they form in space, but they are not. They rest on space, but they but they are not born from it, and the space does not remain on any of them, not based on any of them. Likewise, the defilements, arise on the ground of the purity, but the purity does not rest on the defilements.
Right, I understand. I'm just curious, how is he connecting that to the understanding of Buddha nature?
Understanding of Buddha nature. So this quote I use in order to talk about how Buddha nature can be described as a ground for confusion.
I see.
Okay, so in this case we can talk about two types of causes. Like in Tibetan we say the chegyu, the producing cause, and the cause that allows it. For example, this house is built in the space. The space allows it, but it is not a production of the space. Likewise, the defilements in the mind are there, but they are not produced by the nature. And at the same time, because the nature of mind acts as the space without blocking it, from that perspective, it is called a base of defilement or cause of defilement. Not a producing cause, but a cause that allows it to manifest.
Great, thank you, Khenpo.
Thank you.